I'm Melissa Kean, the president of the Creighton National Alumni Board, and I'm here today speaking with Father John Schlegel about the past, present, and future of the Reinert Alumni Memorial Library here at Creighton. Hi, Father.
Melissa, how are you today?
I'm very well. How are you?
All the way from Texas for this interview.
All the way from Texas for this interview. I love the library. I love the library.
Yes.
I suspected you do.
I'm a library person, yes.
Tell me something I actually don't know. When did you first come here to Creighton?
My first assignment was 1969-1970 one-year appointment as a scholastic to teach political science before I did my theology studies and my doctorate work. So I came in that turbulent year of 69, the high point of the Vietnam War. I was a young 25-year-old, newly minted master's candidate, and my seniors in poli-sci were 22 and they all had draft cards.
Wow.
So it was a great experience.
And did you use the library?
I think in 1969, probably not, except to get some books on reserve. There were a lot of chaos between Brandeis Hall and the library in those days. You know, so pickets, protests, and all that. Yeah.
So you were kept busy out on the.
There was no mall.
There was no mall. It was
the
California
street. Yeah.
Out in the streets.
Out in the street, literally.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so then you went off. You finished your studies and came back.
Came back in 1976, right.
Okay.
To teach poli-sci again.
So then you're teaching. Mm-hmm. So at that point, you really do need to use the library.
I do, and did, yeah. And did my students as well, because I was somebody who assigned a lot of writing work in those days, which was somewhat unusual, but yeah. So, you know, the library was very good in those days. When a lot of students couldn't afford a lot of textbooks, the reserve shelf was a very special shelf, and sometimes it was so numerous that they were actually outside in the main collection, just sections, but usually they're kept behind the circulation desk. But every faculty member had the reserve books, and the students had a list of what the reserve books were back there. And so if they were doing shared projects, it'd all go, in my case, say Canadian foreign policy, they would be out there, only 2 or 3 books in the entire library in those subjects, so we had them all on reserve. Yeah.
What did the library look like back then?
Well, the library, we're sitting in part of the original library, in the rare book room. The library was basically a rectangle. It's half the footprint that it is today. The addition went on, and we designed the addition in '81, but it was simply this box you see outside was the original library. I mean, it's hard to describe it. It was very dark, very few windows. Where we have all the windows now on the west side, that was all bricked in, sandstoned in. Yeah.
So when was the decision made to expand it?
Well, I don't know that exactly. That was a decision of the Board of Trustees. I was assistant academic vice president from 78 to 82. It was in that time frame that Father Morrison was the academic vice president that the decision was made to expand the library. And I think the expansion was originally going to be in 2 or 3 phases. Finances were, like today, tough, and so we didn't quite get it completed. But we did start, and I was delighted to be on the original planning committee, and it was chaired by an individual from Leo Daly Company, and still with them, and still a very good architect, I think. And we did, it was my first sort of building planning. I've done a lot of it since then, but this is my first sort of taste of that.
So at that point, when you were thinking about the library, were we already then thinking about putting in more space for group study and projects and meeting rooms, or does that sort of come later?
I think that came later. We did put in down below, we put in, I think, 5 or 6 sort of study rooms, carrels, internal carrels, for what ultimately turned out to be group projects or something like that. Small seminar rooms was part of their intent.
So that really seems to be a big part of where libraries are going, at least academic libraries.
Oh, if you ask me today the direction of an academic library, and this library included, I would say that definitely is the way to go, that in technology-assisted learning. I think anybody building a library, renovating a library, expanding a library has got to think long and hard on what is the fate, status, and use of a library today. We spent a decade contemplating various cosmetic changes to this particular structure. And as I mentioned in my convocation talk, I really didn't invest a lot of money for a couple of reasons. One is we didn't have it, but one is we were discussing what the library should be.
It's an interesting thing, thinking about the future of the library. You know, I'm a librarian. My office has been in the library for 20 years, and I've seen so much change.
Absolutely.
In the way things get used. And I would be remiss if I didn't say here that the biggest change, I think, is one that you've alluded to, the digitization and the use of online resources.
Right, exactly.
And this library here at Creighton is the first place I ever saw an online database, and had no inkling of how that was about to change my life.
Exactly. This library remains very functional. Perhaps it does lack more group study space, and we do have some of those opportunities. And it's got a fairly reputable and respectable collection for those who want to use the hard copy. And of course, information retrieval electronically is very easy to get. I think anybody walking through here finds it's remarkably active for being a somewhat dated institution.
It really is.
Yeah.
Some of
I'm in
those-
here all the time. I think it's a great little place.
What are you doing here now?
Well, I go in and I actually look at the collection of DVDs and what's new in the history shelves. And more we're getting movies because faculty are using them in classes, and I'm finding I don't have to go to the red box and get mine. I can just come here and get it.
Right.
Yeah,
That's very nice, very handy.
It works.
But those are the kind of things that I think will stay on the shelves too. History, biography, literature, those, I think there will always need to be shelf space for those things.
Well, I think so. I mean, I find that the common discourse of civilization.
Yeah. Yes.
What we share in common are the philosophy and the history and the literature of the day. Yeah. So libraries are very special.
Yeah, I just feel like they are the absolute heart and soul of any academic institution. And clearly, some of the things that were done here, it does need to be updated. But there were some really sound decisions made, I think, that bring people in and make it a place that feels like a beating heart. That commons out there, it's wonderful. It still feels alive in here.
But it always will be the heart of the institution, and it bears two very important names. It carries Father Reinert's name, and Carl was a wonderful founder, building president of this institution. The other part of that is alumni. The Alumni Memorial Library, which is the original name, because that's where the original funding came from, soliciting alumni. That is the heartbeat of a university, and it is the absolute essential heartbeat of the institution. And so I think both those names can go back to your reference of this as being the heart of the institution for two very different reasons, but ultimately the same reason.
I didn't realize. So the alumni were the original donors. So it was a large number of small donors.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
I think the biggest donation in the original building was the UP room, which is down in the lower level. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's as it should be.
No disagreement here.
Everyone has to use the library.
Yes, that's right.
Sometimes
One
against
time,
their will.
That's right. Yeah.
But if you're a student, you got to go in.
Yeah, if you talk about, funny things happening in the library, nothing funny happened during Father Cramper's administration.
Never.
No. That was sort of the rule and the ruler. And he still wore his cassock, the whole bit. He came in, I think, about 1961 and stayed till the late 70s. So he was the librarian I knew in 69, the librarian I had when he came back in 76. Very much a quintessential librarian, never had a day of training in his life. Just another job appointed to another Jesuit to do it. But again, he loved books, and he was very good with people. And so he insisted on service, and so which I think is a real tradition of this library, by the way. I think the folks that work here, whatever position they have, and the students will say the same thing, really deliver and are very, very student-focused and student-centered. And he's very, very proud of this library. He was very instrumental in thinking about that next phase. Never did it because he left before we started the planning of it, but talking about it and talking to Father Reinert about it, and Reinert would talk to trustees about it. So he leaves in 77 roughly, and I think he's succeeded by Ray Means, who is everybody's favorite librarian, a Mr. Chips kind of guy. Rumpled as could be. He looked just like Warren Buffett, in a very expensive suit, but roughed up all the time, and that grin, half grin. And again, just a gentle person. And I left in '82, so I had but maybe 4 or 5 years with him, but couldn't be more different than Father Cramper in terms of style and sort of play it my way or not at all kind of thing. But what they both had was the heart of the enterprise, as we talked about earlier, the role of the library on the university campus and its wellness and its service for the student and faculty population.
This is the love of learning,
Right.
is why we're all here.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add about the 50th anniversary of the library?
Well, I think, Melissa, it's really a milestone, and I want to, first of all, congratulate the library for being here for 50 years and going through the expansion that it did, and the thousands of folks it has serviced over that half century. But also to thank, again, publicly, the individuals who've made the library what it is, what it has been, the individuals who really breathe life into it, the head librarians who have known this as home for 50 years, including Mike LaCroix, our present head librarian, and also to just welcome that next generation of Creighton students who'll be on campus, in the next decades, coming into this building, which will be certainly part of something yet to be determined. But I think when we celebrate the 75th and 100th, it'll be a very different facility. So, happy anniversary, library and library staff.
Thank you very much, Father Schlegel. I appreciate it, and I'm very glad to be here at the 50th anniversary of the Creighton Library.